for District 15. I represent the Central Bronx. I have probably geographically the most expansive district in the Bronx. I overlap with 7 communities, and I have appointments in 6 of them, including Community Board 11. My district extends as far west as Wallace Avenue on Van Ness and Pelham Parkway. I'm sorry, as far east as Wallace Avenue. As far west as the Grand Concourse.
Oh my.
As far north as Bedford Park, and as far south as 173rd. And I found out that I represent the poorest district in the city of New York. And so Van Ness is the working class and middle class core of the district that I represent, and I want to do everything I can to preserve our character and working class neighborhoods. I want to offer a few thoughts on quality of life, on public safety, and then I'll take whatever questions you might have. But as far as I'm concerned, I feel a real threat to quality of life is vacant and abandoned properties.
That's right.
What happens when you have neighborhoods that have high concentrations of abandoned properties? You have more crime, you have more garbage, you have more graffiti vandalism, you have more rodent infestation. It becomes a drain on surrounding property values, on city resources, on quality of life. And so I've given a lot of thought to what can we do to remove blight from our neighborhoods and maintain abandoned and vacant properties. And there are a few ideas that are circulating. One, I don't know if you read in the New York Times, the Attorney General is actually putting forward a bill in the state legislature that would target zombie properties. So there are properties that have been abandoned by their owners, but are not yet owned by the banks.
Yeah.
Even those properties. So if the owner is nowhere to be found, and the banks do not own the property, then who's responsible for maintaining it? The answer is no one. No one. And so these properties become degraded, and it not only affects the property, but it affects everything around it. And so the Attorney General has put in a bill that would require banks to register and maintain zombie properties that are undergoing foreclosure, so that we can hold banks accountable for the maintenance of those properties. So we have a plan from the Attorney General, and the mayor has a plan that would increase taxes on vacant land. When you tax something, you get less of it. And right now, vacant land is taxed at the same rate as residential properties. And he would increase taxes so that landlords no longer have an incentive to warehouse vacant land. And the third is relating to legislation that I'm drafting. I'm drafting legislation that would set up a nonprofit corporation known as a land bank. So if you have vacant land that has stood idle for decades, we would set up a land bank that would be able to acquire the land, relieve it of all its debts, of all the tax liens, and then sell it to a nonprofit that can use it for community development. So if we had a vacant land in Van Ness, and the city could acquire it, could relieve it of all its debts, and then create a youth center.
Or a community garden.
Or a community garden. Or something that is more productive use of the land. So I feel like we have to take a more aggressive approach to confronting the problems of vacant land and abandoned properties, because it becomes a real drain on our quality of life. And I want to offer a few thoughts on public safety. As you know, about 2 weeks ago there was a shooting on Van Ness and White Plains Road. It was a 80-year-old woman whose arm was shot by a stray bullet in broad daylight.
3:30.
Broad daylight. It was because you had rival crews that were battling over turf over a marijuana sale. Right, and I think we've seen these stories, we hear these stories all the time. An 8-year-old child or an 80-year-old senior citizen who have been killed or injured by stray bullets. Just as a side note, Senator Jeff Klein, Assemblymember Mark Joe, and I actually had an opportunity to attend. Sally Adams was her name, her birthday party, and we gave her citations. Yeah. She's been a long-standing member of the Van Ness community, and I was excited to honor her for her long-standing service. But we have to figure out what's at the core of the violence, and most of it is youth violence. A disproportionate share of the gun shootings that take place in our city are committed by young men who are disconnected from society. These are young men who have no fathers to take care of them, no programs to engage them, no jobs to employ them, and so their only existence is life on the streets. And we have to figure out how to reconnect these young men to civil society. Now, there are those who say that we should emphasize social investment rather than policing, and then there are those who say we should only emphasize policing rather than social investment. And the answer is we need to emphasize both. we need to invest in more programming, more community centers, but that's something that takes place over time. We're not gonna, reduce the rate of fatherlessness or increase the employment rate overnight, but it requires investments over time. So the question is, what can we do as far as policing? And I feel the NYPD has actually taken a much more effective approach to addressing street violence. So there's a program known as Operation Crew Cut, and it has 3 elements. The first is it doubles the size of the gang unit. It then focuses the police resources not on the established gangs, not on the Bloods or the Crips, but on street gangs. Gangs that define themselves around blocks or buildings or public housing developments. These are more locally based gangs. And then it follows them not only on the streets, but in social media. It monitors their behavior on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and you have gang members who are boasting about their criminal behavior on Facebook, who are making threats on Facebook. In fact, there was an arrest relating to the program in Mauritania of 10 members. And within a year, the program has led to a 50% reduction in the homicide rate among young people. I know there's controversy about stop. See, my criticism of stop and frisk is that it's indiscriminate. You're just touching every young black man in a poor neighborhood, whereas the Operation Crew Cut is focusing on known criminals. And it's led to a 50% reduction in the homicide rate. So I feel like that's the kind of approach that we should take, is a combination of targeted policing and targeted social investments. I think would prevent the kind of incidents that we saw with Sally Adams a week ago. So those are just a few thoughts I want to offer, but I want it to be driven by your questions.